All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be hearing from Melanie Domenech Rodríguez as she discusses how to inspire positive team culture. I'm Sharia Coet, I'm with CWLI, and I'm going to be joining you all, but just kind of laying low in the background if you need anything. I know Melanie has put together a really interactive discussion using Mentimeter, so that link is going to be provided here in the chat in just a couple minutes. With that said, I'll also monitor the chat box if you have any questions during the discussion. We always will open it up at the end for Q&A, but we want to make this as interactive as possible for you guys. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Martha. She serves on our program advisory board, and she's going to introduce our speaker to you all today.
Thank you, Sharia. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Melanie Domenech Rodríguez. Melanie is a licensed counseling psychologist and professor of psychology at Utah State University. Her areas of interest include Latinx mental health, parenting intervention, cultural adaptation, cultural competence, multicultural psychology, and ethics. Originally from Puerto Rico, Melanie is fluent in English and Spanish. At USU, she founded and leads the Culture and Mental Health Lab. As leader of that lab, Melanie mentors graduate students as they apply for research grants, work towards their master's and doctoral degrees, complete their projects, and submit them for review by psychology research journals. In addition, she has a long record of research publications and presentations, as well as successful research grant applications. She has served numerous other leadership positions, including service on the Psychi Board of Directors as a vice president and president, as Psychi Diversity Director, editor of the Psychi Journal of Psychological Research, president of the National Latino Psychological Association, and is a member of the American Psychological Association Ethics Code Revision Task Force. Please welcome my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Melanie Domenech Rodríguez, sharing her perspective on inspiring positive team culture.
All right. Good morning. How are you? I see smiles. I see thumbs up. I see some folks. I'm going to switch to a gallery view here. I see some folks that have muted their videos. That is perfectly fine. Feel free to unmute those when you feel. I know we're all juggling. I have a dog here who might decide they want to join me in this presentation. So we're all sort of juggling our work and context for being. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Sharia. Thank you, Martha. It's really an honor. I was online reading a bit about the Chattanooga Women's Leadership Institute and was really excited, a little bit sad that I can't be there in person to also take some of your energy back with me. And so I'm going to invite you right now to continue sort of finding your best space for this time together. Please adjust your names. If you want to post your pronouns, feel free to do that. If you want to be called by your title and your last name instead of your first name, or if you want to be called by your first name, I think feel free to go in and adjust your names. And I wanted to do a quick check and see if you all could push your reaction buttons and show me your raised hands like this. Is that something? I see clapping. And then some, oh, I see raised hands. Yes, thank you. I see thumbs up. I'll take it. Thank you, Justin. All right, so I'm hoping that we will be able to use these. I would like to have a bit more of an active exchange. I realize we're on Zoom and that is always a little bit awkward, but if you want to share something, I want to hear what you have to say. So please go ahead and raise your hand. And I will keep this in gallery view so that I can see those when they pop up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm a newbie to Mentimeter. And, oh yes, Shreya is giving you a link. So let's see. I am going to share. I'm going to share this whole screen. And you can see I have other tabs open because I am hoping to share other things with you as well today. All right, those of you that raised your hands, you can lower them now. And we will get into this because I actually want to hear from you before I share my perspectives. I actually want to hear from you. What are things that you think about when you think about positive team culture? And as you use this code, you'll have the option to put 5 words in each of the 5 lines. So go ahead and take a minute to do that. If you want to add more than 5 words, once you hit submit, you can actually go back and add 5 more and 5 more. So please find your spot in the Mentimeter and add some words that you think of when you think of positive team culture. I love joy, supportive. Nice.
Wait, how do we do that? How do we add the words on there?
So there's going to be 5 lines. And I think if you just click on the line and then add your word and then tap the next line. So don't hit submit until you've tapped each of the lines and put your words in. See if that works. Did it work for you, Jocelyn?
I'm using my phone. Don't worry about it.
She might not have opened the website up. Did she put that in?
Did you go to menti.com and type in the code? Oh, she's muted.
Gotcha. I didn't realize there was a website. Yep, I will go to it. I see it in the chat. Thanks.
So I love that as the word support is a little bit bigger than the others, we're seeing it in real time. That's really lovely. Okay, so I love what I'm seeing here because I'm not too far out of left field. So hopefully I will use your time wisely today. But I see a lot of things that I connect with. Joy, happiness, are in their smiles, right? These things, welcoming, warmth. I thought I saw somewhere. There's encouragement, collaboration, comfort, inclusion, engagement, motivation, sharing knowledge, so that idea of collaboration is coming up in different ways. So this is fantastic. I wanted to get a sense from you what you thought of when you thought about positive team culture, because what I'm bringing you is my conceptualization of positive team culture. And I think for me, an important thing to be very transparent about, if I can do that here, yes, is I am, I'm sort of a leader by default. And what I mean by that is I never set out to be a leader. I was going to be a college professor. I was crazy about my students. I wanted to work with them. I was crazy about research. That's what I wanted to do. And once I found my spot, I started working in my communities, in my community of scholars, in my community of colleagues, and helping build that up. And leadership was sort of the natural progression of that engagement. And it was, as I was thinking about this presentation, even after I had built it and then put it by Shariah, and she and I talked, I was like, wait, we wrote a paper I'd completely forgotten about. And that this paper on liderazgo, which is just the Spanish language word for leadership, is a paper that the past presidents of the National Latinx Psychological Association wrote to basically capture what is it that we do as leaders, because we have noticed that we are very consistent in the way that we approach leadership. We're sort of chained, right? And that one person sort of smoothly leads to the next and then to the next. And it helped me get a little bit grounded. And it turns out that everything I had prepared for today was very much connected in this one space. And so this is not a piece of sort of scholarship. It's not empirical. It's not deeply theoretical, but it's just us kind of going back and saying, okay, what is it that we do? And so in a variety of leadership positions, the most significant, the minute I say that out loud, it's like, no, I can't say that. So the National Latinx Psychological Association and Psych-Hi are at the top for a reason. They're very salient to me. Those are ones that I spend a lot of time and energy and thoughtfulness developing. Cultural Mental Health Lab is my research lab space. Right now I have 9 doctoral students, so it's not a small space for an academic context. But I also chair the Institutional Review Board. Are any of you in an academic setting or have done human subjects research? We are the Institutional Review Board. Mandy, you might have different choice words for this, but it's like the group that people love to hate. And so it's an interesting, the National Latinx Psychological Association and Psych-Hi are leadership positions where everybody's sort of waiting for you to come and they welcome you in and people are excited to see you. The IRB is one of those leadership positions where people see you coming and they're like, oh, you are bad and wrong. And so I've had an interesting variety, I guess. And I think if I had to use a name for what I call it, I would call it servant leadership, which is what we wound up calling it in the article. And it's very feminist, which I suspect this group talks about sort of feminist and multicultural approaches to your work and to your leadership, right? It's power sharing, it's transparent, it's seeking to involve folks and empower people within the community of members so that the organization is a reflection of the collective as opposed to a reflection of the individual leading it. And I just made this little stair stepper because I thought, how did I wind up here, right? How did this happen? And it literally happened with, I was a member. And then I attended, this is NLPA. My Psych-Hi stair looks a lot like this one, by the way. So those are very parallel. I started having perfect attendance to the conferences and then meeting people. And then somebody said, hey, you speak Spanish and we have the newsletter. Can you do this piece? And yes, I can, because I'm benefiting from this. So this is a way for me to give back, is to do this translation. Well, that turned into, let's establish a journal. You've done some of that work and you have this experience. So can you help us? Yes, I have this experience. That turned into professional practice issues, which sounded so fantastic and innocent. And it turned into my leading the write-up of the national, the NLPA, National Latinx Psychological Association ethical guidelines. I definitely did not know that I was signing up for that when we started in that committee. But now we have our own ethical guidelines and we wrote them as a group, and it was a very open process of getting commentary from members and getting their lived experiences and having many conversations. And so by the time I got the call in 2015 to run for president, it was sort of the natural progression. And I didn't feel like I could say no, because I felt like it was my turn to take responsibility for leading. And like I said, the Psych-Hi one, I thought I wouldn't bore Martha, and she knows my Psych-Hi ladder, but she's probably smiling because it looks a lot like this. So I thought, what I wanted to do today was I framed this as consejos. And so do any of you speak Spanish? Do you know what consejos means? Jocelyn, you're nodding. How would you define consejos?
Advice.
Yes. And so they're advice with a little bit of like tajin. This is my consejos are like, it's advice, but very much from the heart, right? I've been in the trenches doing this work. You have been too. And so what I want to do is sort of put these forth and share them with you. And when we get to the end, I'm going to ask you that these resonate with you, that they not, what did, what didn't, and what would you add? And these are sort of my big five, I suppose, is promote diversity and engage inclusion. I'm guessing this group is fairly familiar with the difference between those two. Getting on the same page, staying positive, being attentive, and then cultivating self-awareness. And so, my signal that this is coming from the heart is labeling this in Spanish, but hopefully I won't get stuck. Sometimes I do lose my English words. So the first one is promote diversity. And this is a really tricky one. Of course, we've had a couple of years of this really sort of blowing up nationally, right? So y'all maybe have had a book club, or many book clubs have had maybe engaged in difficult dialogues. And the diversity, the promoting diversity part has to do with actual representation, right? So who's in the room and who's not in the room. And so right now I see women in the room. Well, this is the CWLI, so that makes sense, right? So we maybe wouldn't expect men to be in this room. But do we have trans women in the room, right? Who's not here? Who's not here that maybe could be here, that fits in the organization? What is the diversity of ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, SES, life experiences? Veterans are that's a really interesting slice that I don't see a lot in our graduate training. And when I do, I really experience this sort of cultural context that is so salient. So this is what I mean when I say promoting diversity. And it's basically paying attention who's here, who's not here. And, how does who's here and who's not here really reflect what we're about as an organization? And so if I say as the leader of the Culture and Mental Health Lab, I value diversity, I want to study culture, but my lab was all sort of one ethnic group with one set of all light-skinned Latinos that look like me and come from Puerto Rico, that's not a very diverse group. It might look diverse in the context of a university, but we have not created a community that's collaborating on a common goal that is itself diverse. So pros, I think you probably have heard over and over. I won't belabor them. Creativity and growth, of course, but I do want to name, because sometimes it gets tricky and people feel like they can't name these things. Like, well, what is there a downside to it? Yes, there is. There's conflict. When you have people with different views, inevitably there's conflict. And so you'll see this actually show up in a couple of the consejos that are coming forward. But I wanted to name that. And the other side of this is inclusion, which is, okay, so you've brought people in, and if any of you are in early education, like K through 12, you probably have seen this, or in, let's see, what are some other contexts? Ooh, I don't know. I'm such an encapsulated educator. But so we see in K through 12, for example, historically, you have a public education, so all the kids need to show up to school. But then you get these dropout rates, and they're not the same across groups. And that has a lot to do with inclusion, right? Can I participate in this community? Can I be fully a part of it? Can I help co-create it? And if I can't, what does that mean about how this fits for me and how I am valued and perceived in this context? And I put a couple of examples here. They may seem light. They were accessible, so I thought that was useful. But something that we have had to contend with is, for example, at the university, celebrating some holidays and not others. And just recently, there was a series of very important Jewish holidays, and I was having to pipe up because I'm getting texts from my Jewish colleague who's saying they're trying to put this on, I think it was Yom Kippur. They were trying to put one of the scheduled meetings there. And I basically wrote back to the group and said, this is a holiday for some people and we need to move that. So it seems trite, but it's a very powerful, right? When you are, let's just say you're preparing for, I don't know, Christmas is a holiday that a lot of people nationally celebrate. And then all of a sudden your workplace says, we're holding a meeting on December 25th at 4:00. What do you mean? What is that? And then, so on the plus side, a good example of it, if you haven't read Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, I highly encourage you to read it. It's a fabulous write-up. It's super brief and I think very powerful. It's a classic. Peggy McIntosh has been a diversity educator for a long, long time. She's a white woman that sort of had a very harsh wake-up experience in a room full of women of color, where they said, you might be a feminist, but you are white and you're acting white and you're being white in all the worst possible ways. And she listened and grew up and then has sort of made this her life's work. She came up with a technique to make sure that everybody had a voice, which is you go around the room, everybody has 1 minute by a timer and you speak. When it's your minute, you speak and everybody else listens, pens are down. There's no note taking. There's no asking questions after. There's just everybody takes a minute. And she calls it serial. It's something like serial sharing. But the idea is you go around the room fully, and then after everybody has spoken, you get to contribute. Another fabulous example, total shout out to Martha. I would have used it honestly if you hadn't been in this room because it was such a phenomenal example, but you're here. So I will uplift you because that's so fantastic. When we were looking at diversity and inclusion within Psych-Chi, Martha looked at the holidays and said, we are not celebrating Juneteenth. And we started digging and there's this whole history where some states do celebrate it as a holiday and then other states didn't. And we collaborated, but Martha led this effort to basically add Juneteenth to the list of paid holidays for employees in Psych-Chi. That's inclusion. That's inclusion at work. You are looking at the structures of the organization and you're shifting gears so that people feel seen, heard, included, represented. So is this making sense so far? Anything good? So I have a question for you. And this is the scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is strongly disagree and 5 is strongly agree. And I'm interested in knowing where you would rate yourself. And I think nobody's individual answers will show up here. It'll just give me a mean. Shariah, is that correct? It'll just give me the mean of all. Okay. But I would like to get a sense from you where you think you're at in promoting diversity within your organization and promoting inclusion within your organization. Okay. So this is what I would have predicted. And I think this is actually really on point, which is folks tend to be a little bit stronger. It's a little bit easier to promote diversity in the organization than it is to engage inclusion, right? It's a lot easier to say, hey, make space for somebody than to sort of navigate the daily, how do we make this work for everybody? It's tough. And conflict comes in and then you have to negotiate that, right? So is anybody, I would love to hear from you. Does anybody have some examples or have anything they want to share about this sort of contrast between the ease of promoting diversity, which actually these numbers are, you're not near 5, right? So there are even some challenges with promoting diversity. What are some of those that you would share?
I'll share. I actually had a diversity, equity, and inclusion training the other day at work, and it was probably the best one I had been to ever. But they explained the differences, which I never fully understood, as diversity being inviting people to the party, and inclusion would be asking them to dance, which is much harder. And so I never really understood that until like yesterday. But one issue we have in this area in terms of diversity is a lack of local talent in my line of business. And so that's not the same for all over the country. I mean, it varies greatly, but that's one challenge we've had. Another challenge I face is in my industry, people referring people they know, and they only know people like themselves. And so those people get pushed to the front of the line. And so we definitely don't have like a diverse slate of people. Those are our issues around diversity in this market.
Those are great examples. I really, really appreciate, and I appreciate you saying you didn't know the difference between diversity and inclusion until yesterday. So I didn't want to come into the space and be like, super, super basic, but I do think people struggle with that. I do think it's, we've talked about diversity for so long and haven't really talked about equity and inclusion, that all of a sudden we have these new words in the scene, and it was like, okay, is this all one thing? Or are we talking about something else? So I really appreciate your courage. Yeah. Have others experienced these same struggles? And so feeling like, gosh, there's not sufficient diversity in my pool for me to really make space. And I think the referral, right, which is a system that then just gets you more people like the people you already have. Are there similar struggles or maybe different ones on these fronts? Yeah, Martha, jump in.
I think what I've experienced as a lack of diversity makes it even more difficult to notice how people might be feeling excluded for the few diverse people that you have in your group. The people who are sort of the main group, whatever that is, it's as if that the main group doesn't even occur to them that people feeling excluded. It doesn't occur to them things that they might do to make them feel more included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I see some nods. What diversity, whose diversity? There are things that are very visible, and then there are things that are very invisible. I don't know anybody's religious or spiritual traditions in this room. I honestly don't know anybody's sexual orientation. And I'm taking a good guess at gender identity, but I could be totally wrong, right? There are things that are just not visible, and sort of how much time do we spend in our organizations talking about our dimensions of diversity, and what diversity do we have, and then what else do we need? And so back to that sort of who's in the room and who's not in the room. And sometimes we think we know who's in the room, but we don't fully know. And we wind up doing things. I recently learned a student of mine is Muslim, and I had no idea. And then we had a gathering, and I offered everybody alcohol but him, and he kind of came to the front and said, I would like a beer. Like, is that okay? And I'm like, yes, but I thought you didn't drink. And he's like, no. And so, I was running off of my own sort of preconceived notions of what it means to be Muslim. I didn't even know until it came up in a conversation. And then when it did come up, I sort of misapplied rules. And so it's super, super easy to do that. It can lead to conflict. It can lead to people feeling left out. It could lead to a greater depth of understanding, right? And a sort of broader celebration within the organizational context, depending on how you sort of proceed. But all really, really good examples. I guess I just want to name, this is a lot harder than it looks. And I think a lot of folks are saying, you got to do these things, but nobody's saying how do we do this? What does that look like? And when it blows up, how do you work through that? And there's a lot there to unpack. So thank you for these numbers and the discussion. The other things are all very related. I think Dilbert is a product of my generation, so I'm always into that. The getting on the same page, the second consejo, is really about setting up very clear expectations for the team. And so what is the team mission? Do you know what is it that we're doing and why are we doing it? Who is in the team? I don't know about you, but for me, sometimes that is not so clear. Who's the us? Who is the community? Sometimes people are within our organization, within our group, that feels really clear. But then we have these partners externally that may or may not be part of the team. In my case, I have a lot of students that are in other labs that want to be a part of my lab. They want to be a part of this community, so I welcome them. And then when I'm sending out emails, I'm like, do I include them? Do I not include them? How many expectations can I have of these other partners? And so those things I think are super critical because they help us articulate rationales for the things that we're doing and for the direction that we go in as leaders. And also, I think a part of expectations, those first two are sort of maybe more expected for folks with leadership experience like yours. But I would also add here, expectations about the process are super important. And I think both about process expectations that are directed at building community and process expectations that are about protecting the community. And I think of community building as all of your positive stuff, right? How do you celebrate successes? Do you celebrate birthdays? Do you, when somebody has a personal loss, their fire burns down, a loved one dies, how do you manage that as a group? Are you more personal or more professional on that front? What does that look like? But how are you building community? Because regardless of your style, you can build community in your spaces. And that will be really important in general for that joy and happiness and smiles that you put on the word cloud, but also when it's time to protect the community. And what I mean by that is preparing for the negatives. I have learned, and I really value having learned this piece. I will tell people up front, there is likely to be conflict, right? We have a diverse group of people in a small space, all with similar goals, all really talented and smart. And guess what? Like, smart people like to lead and talented people like to lead. And we have big ideas about what the right path is. And when you have 5 of those people in the same room, it is almost inevitable that people are going to start pulling in different directions. And that's got to be okay. That is just a natural and normal part of being in community and working collaboratively towards shared goals. And so how do we prepare for conflict? Okay, we're gonna get there next. So I have this question for you, but I learned from Mentimeter that I only have limited, okay, I had limited questions that I could ask you, and I was misbehaving when it came to keeping to my limited thing. So I'm going to put in the chat this link. And if you click on that, it should take you right to this Google form. Do you know the mission of the team that you lead, right? And so, yes, I can recite it in my sleep. Yes, but I'd have to look it up to be 100% accurate. And then there's everything else. I'm not sure. Is there a mission? What's happening? And so can you see the responses here? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Oh, I love that. I love that we have some of those. There's a mission statement. Yeah. So this is such a great pause. And I love that nearly a third of you can say, yeah, I can recite it in my sleep. I think that's less usual. I think folks, you know, if I had to look up the mission of my university, I'd have to go look it up. I know we have one. I've read it over and over, but I don't know it by heart. And so I would encourage you, actually, when we were in Psych-Hi, Martha had these cards made with the mission of Psych-Hi. That was brilliant, right? Everybody just kind of stuck them in their wallet. And I would read it in the unlikeliest places. Like sometimes I'd be in the supermarket and I'd had it in my little wallet and I was like pulling out my credit card and I was like, oh, this is here. And I would hand the credit card over and I would read the mission while the cashier was processing my credit card. This is pre-COVID because now nobody will touch anything. But this is, I guess, my invitation to you to think about, oh, what is that mission? And how does it connect to what I'm doing? As you're building positive team culture, you know, I might say to my students, we need to collaborate. And that means we're negotiating authorship. If you want conflict between academics, like just start talking about authorship on a paper, people get very cranky very fast. You know, but I will say we need to do this. This is hard work because you are preparing to set up your own lab in which you value collaboration, and you need to figure out how to do that. And to the degree that we figure that out together, you'll be better prepared to do that above and beyond. So knowing the mission, right? Knowing what it is that I'm doing then allows me to use that in shaping people's behavior. So this is going to show up again. So that my third consejo is be positive and stay positive. And I put this, you know, less than genuine face, because I think this whole notion of being positive has been misconstrued by some in a way that's actually very much has a backfire, right? Like, oh, how are you today? Oh, you're so perfect. You're so perfect. And so actually, this might be a more fun. Oh, cool. Yay. All right. Let me actually, I'm going to ask you this now. Okay. I set myself up for success and then I actually forgot how I had done that. Let me give you this link and go ahead and tell me which of these praise statements would you want to receive? The first one is, when you meet deadlines, you help me meet my deadlines. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. And the second one is, you rock, you're awesome, you're the best. Oh, it looks like Pac-Man. Did anybody else grow up with Pac-Man? I played Mrs. Pac-Man this weekend. It's very exciting. Okay, so most of you chose, let's see how many people. We have one person who would really love to hear that they rock and they're awesome and the best, which I get, it resonates. But most of you prefer, when you meet deadlines, you help me meet my deadlines. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. Would maybe just a couple of you unmute and tell me what it is about that feels like a better fit for you?
I'm actually the one that put you rock. And the reason why I selected that is because I just really have that desire to really connect with my coworkers, with the people around me. So I would like to be able to contribute to not only helping meet their deadlines, but if they're going through something difficult at home and having at work, I want to be able to help them that way. If not just, I don't want to just help you meet your deadlines. I would like to, we are now part of a family, and I want to help in other ways just besides meeting the deadlines. That's the only reason why I chose that.
So I love that, and thank you, because I built this with a particular thing in mind, and your philosophy is very much like mine. Like our shortcut for the Culture and Mental Health Lab is the Lab Fam, literally. So we have like the same sort of family kind of approach to our groups, and what you're saying about really wanting to be perceived more globally as a support is really resonates with me, and I'm guessing it resonates with others. There's some other nodding. For those of you that went with the when you meet your deadlines, you help me meet mine, etc. Like, what was it about that resonated with you?
I liked that it was specific in how I helped. It's funny because I don't give feedback like that. I give feedback like you rock, you're awesome, you're the best. Like I do that all the time, but because I'm trying to recognize their whatever they did and not overlook it. But I've been recently trying to slow down and add to why it was impressive that they did what they did or how it was helpful. So I'm trying to slow down. I don't always have that kind of time.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I appreciate from what you're saying that you're pointing to how effortful it can be to pay attention to what people are doing right. I think that's just real. Any others?
I chose that one because that's, unlike Stephanie, that's the kind of feedback that I try to give people all the time. Like when you behavior, it then helps us in this way. And so I like to hear that too. That may not be the feedback that I get all the time. I do like to hear I rock, of course, but knowing what behavior helped them and how it helped them is important to me.
Yeah, thank you. And you're all hitting on exactly, I think positive feedback is specific, clear, and accurate. And so I think, maybe all of us can pull off a you rock, you're the best, and have that be a super bonding, awesome thing. But there are some folks that really don't. I've had a number of students say, yes, okay, that's great. I understand that you like me and have positive feelings right now, but what exactly was it that I did? Because I don't understand. And I've noticed over time how helpful it is and how much you can shape in the direction of your values and your goals, people's behavior within your organization when you're specific. So for me, with my students, I adore them, and their levels of anxiety are off the charts. If you want to see like super high levels of anxiety, come to a doctoral program in clinical or counseling psychology, and it is anywhere and everywhere. And folks sometimes have a real sort of kickback to praise. And I like to praise perseverance. So these folks are super anxious, they get a B grade, and they're like, this is it, I'm going downhill, like I'm going to get kicked out, I'm going to be put on probation. And I have learned to say, I'm actually glad you got a B, because this means you are really working on figuring out your work-life balance. You're trying to figure out how to calibrate this to make it doable for you, which is actually a way in which you stay in the long term. And the kind of investment I'm making right now in mentoring you is for the long term. So I want you to struggle with this. I know it's not easy. I know getting a B doesn't feel good. But man, I love that you are calibrating this and struggling through, and a B is a perfectly fine grade. Like we have these conversations and then I'm communicating, right? I actually value perseverance. I value work-life balance. I'm not going to praise all your A's and then tell you, oh, by the way, but remember to engage self-care. Like how, when? And so I think that positive, clear, accurate is a way to really shape people in the direction of the values that you're trying to shine a light on. And it also helps with conflict. And so one of the ways in which I communicate my values around conflict in the most sort of positive way is to say ahead of time, I will likely irritate you, you will likely irritate me. And I am really committed to our relationship. I'm committed to your success. And I am committed to working out whatever rough patches may lay ahead. So I'm going to put that here now. If we never have conflict and it's magical, then we'll like celebrate with a bottle of champagne at the end of your graduate career. But the possibility of us working literally so closely for 5 years and not having any conflict is just about as close to zero as you can get. And so I value our relationship, and I'm going to prioritize protecting that relationship, growing it, and struggling through the challenges. And that's a way to sort of do that, preparing ahead of time, staying really positive. That'll be an opportunity for us to understand each other better, what works for each other, and how we repair ruptures. And I'm very confident that we can do that. And so it's not always like, you know, like her face, oh yeah, let's be positive all the time. It's like, there's positivity. There are opportunities and growth in conflict. Are we still good? Okay. Uh-oh, how does one? Okay. I'm gonna skip through here because we are, this makes me so sad. Okay, so the fourth consejo is be attentive. I think being on the lookout for strengths as they appear is challenging. And Stephanie, you said like, that's really effortful. I completely agree. And I think it's super important. And where it's most effortful and most challenging for me is when people have strengths that are hard for me to see. For example, I want you to be timely. And then I just get super frustrated when students are like pushing all the deadlines, right? And comps are not getting done. Or with NLPA, you know, we had to write, like right now we have the situation at the border with Haitian immigrants, like we need a statement from the organization, and now it's 2 weeks and it's not been written. And I'm like, what's happening, right? And it's easy to get focused on you're not timely, you're not getting this thing done, you're not good in this position. And it's harder to pull out and say, okay, is this person a good fit for this thing that I've given them, that I've assigned to them? And what are their strengths? And sometimes the person that isn't timely may be super thoughtful, right? And so their final product is amazing because they're extra thoughtful, but it's problematic because it's not done on time. And so being able to sort of hold on, bye Patricia, no worries. Being able to hold on to those things. And I would say extra props. I think naming the strengths is really great. Celebrating your successes. If you can build rituals in your organizations, I think extra props. This is something that I did I don't even know how this idea came up. I think it might've been one of my students. So you can see our jerseys are all the same. And you can see that we have diversity of size in my group. Lester is one of our recent graduates, Lester Papa, and then Ana Kempo Reeves. And they were the 19th dissertation and the 20th dissertation defended in the lab. And so what I do is I make them jerseys and I put our numbers in the back. I'm ground zero, not a great metaphor, but that's where I went in that moment. And it turns out people are like rushing to be the next number now. It's hilarious. They're just like, I'm going to be 21 and I'm going to be 22. And they're like, I'm going to be in line before you. But it's sort of a playful kind of ritual, and everybody's looking forward to getting their jersey. Everybody shows up for the ceremony. We celebrate together when there are graduations and whatnot. And I think we do this, you know, we do this I do this in different spaces. In NLPA, we had a whole ceremony at the conference, but I think don't be shy about sort of ritualizing and having fun with some of these things. I also would say be attentive as addressing problems as soon as they emerge. And I think that's a tough one because sometimes we see a little thing and we're not really sure. And it's hard to call it out and then be wrong. And so I think I certainly have felt this, but I think a lot of us in leadership positions are a little bit hesitant to bring things up early. And I'm a huge fan of saying, I may be completely wrong, but I'm noticing something's out of whack. So I'm going to check in. Help me, like, where are you at? What are you seeing? How are you experiencing this? It makes future conversations easier. And sometimes what I've noticed is that when I bring that up, folks are not paying attention. So they look at me funny and go, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And then a week later or 2 weeks later, I'll get hey, can you meet? Actually, I was really thinking about this and I started paying attention and thinking about what you said, and we probably should check in. And so it just creates the space if necessary. And it's just a way to take care of things, I think, in advance. And the last one would be to cultivate self-awareness. And so I think it's really important in looking at leadership, not to just look right at the people that I'm leading, but like, what am I doing? How am I a leader? How am I leading? And I think really knowing your leadership style. So I'm very much multicultural feminist. I want everybody at the table. I want everybody contributing. If I have somebody in my team that's a tell me what to do kind of person, it's not a great fit for them. And so we need to negotiate that. And there are people that prefer that. I came to grad school. I came to, I'm not in an elected position. I signed up to be the whatever science advocate. Just tell me what to do. You all that have elected positions you're the ones leading. And it's not sort of the best fit necessarily. And so I think knowing that style so you can name it and you can negotiate it. And I think knowing your strengths and also your weaknesses is really critical. I think for women, my experience in leadership has been that women, and I will count myself in as number one exhibit, are not super good at saying, I rock X, Y, or Z. Like, I'm a fantastic editor. When your papers are done, send them my way. They're going to go in beautiful. Or, you know what? I've got organizational wiles for miles. Like, bring me that part, I'll take it. I think we do the work and we select the things because we know our strengths, but I don't think we own them. And I think it's important to do that. And I've had a lot of junior colleagues, especially women, say, I loved hearing you say whatever strengths, because now I feel like maybe it's okay for me to say that too. And I do the same with weaknesses. And I know that could be slippery, but for me, I need to sometimes provide people with workarounds. And so sometimes emails get by me and I just tell people ahead of time, here's my cell phone. Like, if the email doesn't come through, or if I don't get to it, like, please feel free to text me. I know this is my problem. It's an issue. I'm working on it. And until I succeed and get that under control, here are 3 different things that you could do to reach me. And I think that just kind of keeps those conflicts lower. I know that that's a tricky one. And I think especially for women in leadership, if there are very gendered interactions, or for people of color who are maybe in a predominantly white space or whatever, right? Whatever those dimensions of diversity are that are in the space, sometimes owning your weaknesses can then turn into a vulnerability where people are using it against you. So I think sort of proceed with caution. In the context that I've been in, it has served me well. And so I included it here as an important piece of I think changing organizational cultures, right? And transforming organizational cultures from where we are at. So those are my consejos. And what I would love from you is actually to go here real quick and tell me, like, what resonated with you, which of these, so these are my 5 consejos, like, which resonated with you the most, and maybe which resonated with you the least. And maybe we can like discuss that for a few minutes before we wrap up. Did I put that in the, did I put the,
I can see it on the website.
okay, good. Are you able to respond, Martha? There. Okay.
Yes, I'm just thinking.
Okay. Oh, yeah. This is. Okay. Okay. This is cool. So what I'm seeing is that different things resonated with different ones of you, and I think that's kind of nice. So there was enough for everybody to sort of connect with a different piece. And I'm curious. I'm curious as to what you might add. Like if you want to sort of address any of these things, especially like if something didn't resonate with you, or like what questions you might have there. But I'm also curious as to what you might add before we go, because this is a think tank, right?
The only other thing I think I would add is I am not like the ultimate top of my team, and my leadership style is very different than my manager's leadership style. And so I oftentimes feel caught in between missions, priorities, not on the same page, like my limited ability to control my universe.
Mm-hmm. Super good point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Have some of you figured out a super fabulous way of negotiating those? That yes, you're a leader, but there's somebody, you respond to somebody above you.
I think that, I mean, I'm sure there's so many different ways to tackle that, but I feel that when you do and you are a good example of what you're trying to get others to imitate, it gives, how do I say this? Like, for example, if you're a good listener, you respect everybody else's opinions, even when they're very different than yours. You allow people that time to express their opinions. So you give that courtesy. I feel that then your boss or whoever is above you, when they see that other people respect you because you are a leader in this field of diversity and inclusion, then they will see that and they will hopefully allow you to, okay, Jocelyn, give me more ideas. You know, why are people going to you? Why do people trust you? What's going on over here that I see the staff going to this one person? Oh, they respect her or him. Why? And so I feel like when your boss or your upper management sees that, then it's very natural that they'll start respecting you more for it and allow you to implement your ideas and your opinions about how to improve the culture in the team. But I think it's almost like instead of forcing it, being a magnet, attract people to you, to want to come to you and seek your advice, or hey, how can we improve on this? Not because you say you're good at this, but because I see that you show it by the way you are in the workplace. And I feel like that works a lot better than to have to try to force, because I mean, I think all of us that are in this call right now, we're obviously passionate about creating a great culture in our workplace. And when we're passionate, it's frustrating a lot of times. Why isn't this being implemented? We can do better, we can this. But if you have raised any children or you're a teacher in some way, shape, or form, we know that forcing our ideas into anyone is just not the best way to go, but maybe being a magnet and attracting that. And I think that tends to help them be more open-minded about your opinions and your suggestions. Sorry, long answer for.
I love that. I feel like it's also there's sort of the question and the meta question. So the comment which you addressed so beautifully, Jocelyn, you know, there are strategies, and I think that's sort of a whole other talk, right? Advocacy within your organizations, which I engage a fair amount, and that's like a whole set of skills of negotiating at the different levels. And that's sort of the meta question within the question is, I'm assuming healthy organizations, which I've been really fortunate to be a part of. If you're in a toxic environment or a really hostile organization or an unhealthy space, that's a whole other conversation. So I appreciate, hopefully there are nuggets in here that are helpful, but if you are in a really unhealthy context, that's like doing some of these things, like naming your weaknesses, right, could really backfire in an ugly way. So I love that sort of, there's all this, and then we take it with a grain of salt, and there's a lot more context. So in that spirit, because I know you all are busy, and I know some people have already had to step away, I'm leaving my email in the chat. Feel free to reach me if you are interested in resources and or want to continue the conversation. I would love to hear from you, and I'll get you, Shariah, the PDF. Thanks again. It is what an honor to be in this space. I feel uplifted. So thank you for creating this space and inviting me in here.
Absolutely.
Thank
No,
you.
thank you,
Thank
Melanie.
you.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm so happy that you spoke on this important topic. Thank you, Martha, for connecting us with Melanie. It was such a privilege. We'd love to hear your feedback in addition to what you kind of went over in today's discussion, but I just put out a brief survey link there. If you wouldn't mind just giving us your feedback, we'd love to know how we can improve on these programs in the future. And thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us. We have another program coming up October 19th. So make sure you register for that. We're going to be talking about how to affect change at any level. So mark your calendars. And don't worry if you missed anything on today's discussion. We'll archive it on our online portal, Thinkific, and I'll extend that link to you all here in a little bit. So thank you all again for your time, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.